All right. Thank you so much for joining, everyone. My name is Lance. I'm a product specialist here at LabKey. I'm so excited to show you Sample Manager today. So we'll be going over what Sample Manager is, how it can help you track your samples in the laboratory, and whatnot. So we'll go ahead and go over who LabKey is as an organization, just so you have some background information, and then we'll dive straight into the demo. We have a poll up right now asking what key features you're looking for in a sample management system. So if you want to answer that, that'd be great. But otherwise, we'll go ahead and get started. If you have any questions, please feel free to go ahead and ask them in the chat or ask them in the Q&A panel. Thanks. So LabKey started over 20 years ago as part of the Fred Hutch Cancer Research Center in Seattle, Washington. We have over 20 years of experience in scientific data management. So we're really experts in that. And we work very closely with every single one of our clients to make sure that we have both the support that you all need, but we can also help make sure that we're gearing our software in the way that scientific organizations expect it. So Sample Manager is a very dynamic system, and we work very hard to make sure it doesn't outdate, and we continuously have new features added to it all the time. So when you're choosing the right software, we want to make sure that we cover a few things. You need to consider the different requirements you have. So think about your lab structure. How many technicians do you have? Do you have lab management? Do you have students? This kind of goes into the number of users and roles you need to have. Do you want all of them to have admin access? Do you need some people to only be able to edit some samples? Maybe you don't want them to delete anything, and whatnot. You also need to consider what types of samples you have and the amount of samples you're needing to capture. Does the software allow you to customize all of the different sample types you have and the data associated with those samples? And is it able to store that large quantity of samples? Then there's also the data capture and management. How are you wanting to capture your data? Are you wanting to use the software's interface in entering in those samples? Do you want to upload an electronic manifest? Do you want to use an API to communicate with other systems? So that's also something to keep in mind. And then there's also the ease of use. How easy is it for your users to learn the system? Or is it something that's a bit more complicated and takes a lot more time? Understanding that can really help you understand exactly which softwares you're looking at. Then there's the key features. These are things like freezer management, knowing where your samples are stored. Do you need to track the lineage of your samples? Are you needing an electronic lab notebook or supporting compliance? And does the system enable barcoding? Does it have its own barcoding system? Does it recognize samples that already have barcodes? So these are kind of questions to ask. And then once you have an idea of which software you want, it's also very important to keep in mind who the vendor is. Do they have experience with scientific data management? What does their customer support look like? Do you have to submit a ticket? Do you post in a help board? Do they charge more for your customer support? These are all different things that you should keep in mind. And then, of course, there's different software updates. Is it you basically get one system and then it outdates over time, or do you continuously get new updates? Do you have to pay more for those updates? Then there goes into the pricing models. Do they charge by user? Do they charge by the tier of the software? How does that kind of look? And does it allow you to grow as an organization? Can you start small with just tracking your samples, but then later on, maybe you want to track assays or tests results, or maybe you need to track study data management. So these are all kind of important things to keep in mind when you're looking at a software. So as we kind of go through this, we'll keep in mind what this all looks like as we go through Sample Manager and see how we kind of match up with these different systems. Looking at the poll, it says that a lot of you were more interested in sample tracking, which is great. So we can track kind of where the samples are, their lineage relationships. There's freezer management, so we can kind of track that, workflow management, and then test assays and results. So we'll track all of that as we go through here. As I said before, we've been around over 20 years ago from the Fred Hutch Cancer Research Center here in Seattle, Washington, but we've grown with a bunch of different organizations. You can see a lot of them listed here. So we can really make sure that we're working with a bunch of different types of science, from biology to pharmaceuticals, chemistry, geology. We really want to make sure that our system is scientific agnostic so we can help support everything that you're working with. For today's demo, we're really going to be focusing on three main pillars of Sample Manager. We have our data integrity, so we're making sure that we're capturing all of the data that you need, and we're going to make sure that it's accurate. We can have different parameters for what types of data you have, like or you can have a drop-down options for the data you're selecting. You can have numerical values, date values, just to make sure you're entering things you expect. We also have very robust sample traceability, so we know exactly where our samples are stored in a freezer, inside of a box. We know exactly where they're coming from a specific patient or an animal. And then we can also track child samples off of that if you're deriving them or aliquoting them. And then this also gets captured in our audit log, so that kind of helps with some compliance support. You can see exactly who, when they did it. And then our system's very flexible. We can customize the types of data that you're entering in it. You can have as many different sample types as you need and as much data fields as you want with that as well. So we'll kind of go into that, but today we are going to be looking at something that's a bit more clinical based, but you can use your imagination and pretend we're working, instead of with blood samples, maybe we're working with rocks or dirt or parts of a plant. So we'll go ahead and get started. With Sample Manager, we have two different tiers. We'll be focusing on both of them today, but it looks like a lot of us are more interested in that freezer management and sample lineage tracking, but we'll also kind of spend some more time on some other features. We can look at our searching and reporting for these samples, our full audit trail, assay data management, electronic lab notebook, workflow management, data partitioning with projects, and then APIs so we can communicate with other softwares. And then after this, we can go ahead and set up a personalized demo to really dive into your use case. We'll answer any of your questions. If you have any afterwards, we're more than happy to kind of answer those too over email or in another demo. And then we can also get a guided trial set up, which we'll go into this afterwards. But thanks for joining today. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat as we go ahead and dive into Sample Manager. So this is my home page of Sample Manager. Here I can see all of the different sample types we have in our system. These are all customized or configured to make sure that we're capturing the types of samples we're working with. So here we have like blood, DNA, PBMC, could be something like dirt, specific types of rocks, plant pieces, whatever it is that we're needing to capture. This also provides an overview of the different sample statuses that these have, so we can see which samples are available, which ones have been consumed or discarded, and then which ones are locked to make sure there's no changes made to them. These statuses are also configurable, so you can have whichever statuses you want. Scrolling down, we have a list of our different storage units. So we have the ones that I've recently opened. So I work in this freezer quite a bit, and I work in this workbench a lot too. So we can kind of get to what we're continuously working on pretty quickly. It also provides an overview of the different types of samples we have inside of each of these storage units, but then it also shows us how much space is available inside each of these storage units. So that way, if a freezer goes down, you can get a pretty good idea of where you can move those samples while you get that freezer either back up or you're cleaning it and thawing it. We also have a list of jobs that have been assigned to me. So these are workflow tasks that I need to work on in the laboratory, make sure I'm getting everything done that I should be. And then I can also go and see what active tasks are also pending in case someone calls out sick. I can cover for them pretty easily. I also have a list of my recently opened electronic lab notebooks. So if I'm trying to track my experimental notes, I can quickly click on whichever experiment I was working on and get into that very quickly. To navigate through Sample Manager, we have this dashboard here. This is going to provide me a list of my different sources or where these samples came from, like they were taken from a specific mouse or a specific patient, or they're from a specific study or lot. We have our different sample types listed out here, our different assays or tests that we're running on these samples, and then our different storage units. We also have these different projects, and this is how we partition our data, so only certain users can have access to specific samples that they should under their project. For right now, let's go ahead and look at what our sample grid looks like for our blood samples. When I click on this, it's going to bring up every single one of my blood samples, as well as the different data fields associated with these specific samples. So here I can see I have a QC state, a barcode system, a draw date, whatever data fields we need. We don't limit the types of data that you have here, so you can very quickly have as many different columns as you need or as few columns as you'd like. Whenever you see these grids, you can also filter through these different data fields. So let's say I want to find all my blood samples that have failed a quality control test. Here, it's going to pull up these two samples, and I can get some more detailed information on what's going on with these, as well as where they're stored if they're checked into storage. Whenever you see one of these kind of grids here, you can also download it into a CSV, Excel, or TSV spreadsheet. So if you need to maybe ship these samples out somewhere else, you can quickly download an electronic manifest and send that to whoever should be receiving these samples. From this grid, you can also customize the grid view. So if I want to see a consent form view, I can pull up everything that has a consent form. I can quickly do that, get some more information on these specific samples, and kind of limit the types of data I'm seeing here. That way, when I download this, I'm sending information that the people that are interested in can view and access. In this grid, you can also select whichever samples you need. You can edit them. You can derive them or aliquot and derive them to a different sample type, assign them to a specific test, add them to a workflow job, or check them in and out of storage. That way you can really do a lot with these specific samples and like kind of these central hubs for this data. Right now, let's go ahead and look at a specific sample type. And of course, my caps lock is on. We're going to go ahead and go to blood 4733. I like using this sample just because it has a lot of data associated with it. When I click on the sample, I'm brought to its sample page, and I can see exactly where it is in storage for the exact freezer, box, and exact location inside that box. I can see how many aliquots the sample has had created and how many of these are available. I can see whatever notebooks this sample is associated with, and then I have all of its metadata here. Something that's really interesting for a lot of folks is tracking our lineage. And when I click on this lineage page, I can see how this sample is related to everything else in my laboratory. So I can see that this blood sample was drawn from this specific mouse and that this specific mouse is a part of this study. I can also see whatever child samples that this blood sample has. So I can see this sample has 3 aliquots and that one of those aliquots has this blood aliquot, but I can also see what derivatives it has. So I can go from blood sample type to PBMC to DNA. This is just a great way to kind of track some more information of these samples, get a visual view of what's going on. I can also get this view on a patient or a mouse level and see all of the samples that came off of this specific mouse. Of course, if your study or your patient has a lot of samples, this view might not be as helpful, but we do have a samples tab, so you can also break down the different sample types under this mouse and get some more detailed information on what's going on with these specific samples. Going back to my specific sample, I can also go to this assays tab, and this is how we're tracking our test results for a specific sample. This is also going to be true for our sources like our patients or mice, so we can see what test results they have and how that may be changing over time. So here we have like our CBC panel, so we're tracking our white blood cells, red blood cells, and whatnot. These, of course, are also customizable, so whichever test you're running, you can also capture here and kind of go from there. Looks like we have a question. I'll kind of go into that. Yeah, so you're interested in using Bartender. We do allow Bartender to kind of integrate with Sample Manager, and we can definitely dive into a bit more from that. And that kind of allows us to kind of print off barcode labels, and I'll kind of answer that question a little bit more as we kind of get a little bit further. Going back to the assays tab here for our blood samples, yeah, you can definitely track all of these, and then of course you have that sample grid. Once you have this data with these samples, you might be wondering, okay, what's happened to the sample over a period of time? With Sample Manager, we are very sample-centric, so we have a sample-centric audit log. We do also have like a storage audit log and then a system-wide audit log too, but this is very helpful if you're trying to investigate a specific sample. Here, I can see everything that's happened to the sample from the moment it's been registered all the way to when we consume it. So I can see that Hannah registered the sample in 2023. I can see all the data that was assigned to the specific sample that she registered it. And then I can also see exactly what's changed with these specific samples. So I can see that we changed the event details and see that we've been checking them in and out. If your audit log is also very long, like this specific sample is, you can also kind of narrow it down to see, I only want to see my storage events because the sample went missing somewhere. I need to see who last checked it in or checked it out of the system. So kind of going from here, we'll go ahead and look at what our storage system looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the sample specific storage location, and it's going to bring me to this box in our LabKey Freezer 1. When I do that, it's going to highlight the exact storage row and the exact storage column. If I kind of click on my other samples, it'll also bring up the samples information kind of on the right hand, and we'll kind of go from there. From this page, I can also check my samples in and out of storage. I can either do it one sample at a time or multiple samples, whichever one I need to do. But for this demo, we'll go ahead and just do one sample. I'm going to go ahead and say I'm going to check it out, and it's going to ask me for my reason. This is going to go ahead and go in my audit log. So I'm just going to say for my demo. And when I do that, it's going to highlight this square as pink. This means that this spot is reserved, so we won't let anyone else check a sample into the specific location because we're assuming that when you're checking the sample out, you want to put it back into that exact location. If you do want to free up the space, you would just move it somewhere else, like a workbench. That way other people can put another sample in that location. When I'm going to go ahead and check the sample back in, it's going to ask us how much we used when we checked it out. So let's just say we're going to use 100th of a mil, and it's going to ask us if we want to increment our freeze thaw count. I'm going to go ahead and say for my demo. And if you kind of peek back here, you can see we have 500ths of a mil, and we have a 33 freeze thaw count because I'm always using these for these demos. So it's in and out a lot. When I check my sample back in, we can see that it automatically reduced the amount we have available in the sample, and it automatically increased our freeze thaw count. That way we can have some real-time information of what's going on, and so other users can also see what's changing with these samples. And it is a cloud-based system, so it's also going to update for everyone else as they kind of log in and use it. Scrolling down in this box, you can also have a box manifest here. So this way, if you're shipping out an entire box, you can quickly download it and send it to whoever should be expecting that box. These boxes can have different parameters. So you can have something like a 4x4 box, 10x10, whatever it is that you have. You can have plates or racks, kind of whatever it is that you're needing to have. And then these freezers can also be configured to have as many different shelves as you need, as many different racks, and you can build them out as much as you need. So if you have like a freezer, a shelf, rack, drawer, boxes, we can easily do that and customize it for you. If I wanted to move this sample now from this location and say move it to a workbench, I can also go to my storage units and select a specific space. We're going to show you how much free space is inside each one of your storage units. That way you don't have to go room to room, opening freezer after freezer, just trying to find a single spot because that gets really annoying really fast. But let's say you have a box in front of you, you can also search for that box name and just say, I want to find like box 5. We're going to bring up all of those options that do that. So it's going to be much faster to kind of select whichever box you're looking for. And let's say we're moving it to box 1. I can select whichever positions I want, move it to any location. We'll automatically fill it to the most recently available space. But let's just say I'm adding it to C1. I can quickly move that sample to that location too. So that is kind of how we configure our storage. It's very easy to use, and we make sure all of our users have training on how to use the system and making sure that everyone is successful with the software. Moving on, I think it's very important to also look at our workflow jobs. So these jobs can track exactly which samples we should be working on, which tasks users should be doing, and then we can also track who is assigned to these specific jobs and kind of the start dates and the due dates of when all of these systems are set up. And these workflows are kind of like a step-by-step SOP. So we're really going to be following the checklist of all of the tasks we should be doing. And with this one, this is like a shipment test or a task. So we can kind of see we need to collect the samples, package them up, print the ship manifest, print an address label, and then ship the samples. We can also associate a specific tracking number or a shipping courier so we know exactly what we should be expecting. And let's say the box gets lost, we can easily pull up this tracking number and see what's going on. But if I go to like a blood analysis job, we can also see that we're allowed to track our assays or the tests we should be running on these specific results. And from this tasks page, I can also import the data for these samples. We can have different run details, and this is going to be true for all of the samples under this run. So it's typically something like an operator, a test kit, the instrument we're using, and then we can input the information for each sample that's going to have different test results. We can either do that through an Excel spreadsheet upload or an API. And then for like our LabKey limbs, we can do transformation scripts to go from your instrument into the software. So we try to make it as easy as possible and have many different ways to import this information for your laboratory to make sure everyone has the best use out of it. And of course, with the workflow jobs, you can go in and see exactly which samples you should be pulling. You can also see where they are in storage if they're checked in to make it very easy to know exactly what you should be doing. Moving on from our workflows, we'll go ahead and go into our notebooks. And this is where we can see all of our different experimental notes. So it's kind of a great way to keep track of what results we're running. And the great part about having an ELN connected with your sample management software is that the data is going to be connected. And so you can reference like your different patients and your sources or your mice and your samples. And with Sample Manager, we run it very similar to social media. So it's pretty easy to pick up. So you just do like an @ sign and you're basically just tagging whatever samples you need. And it kind of fills in whatever we think you're kind of pulling in. And so you can quickly click it and it'll be referenced in this notebook and you can kind of hop around to where that sample is in the system, or you can kind of view, hey, where is it being referenced? I need to kind of figure this information out. We also allow to have kind of images embedded in the text. This is just a great way for me to show off my cat because I think he's adorable and I like to brag about him. But we also allow like checklists and graphed tables, and you can also have attachments too. So if you just want to include like your raw test results that you received from a reference laboratory, you can easily do that. With these notebooks, if they're really, and so sorry if I paused for a moment, it looks like my internet kind of cut out for a moment. But I was just saying we can allow multiple authors in a notebook so you can kind of work on it in a collaborative manner. And then once this notebook is finished, you can send it off to get an electronic signature. And this really helps with compliance pieces to make sure that we're reviewing our work and making sure we're following protocols. These notebooks can also be set up in a specific template. So if you need to capture your data the same time every time, you can easily do that. Moving on, so we have kind of all of our notebooks, our data and with our samples and our test results, they're all checked in. How do we find the samples that we're really looking for? Sample Manager has sample finder. So this way I can search for samples based off of specific criteria. So I can go ahead and find all of my samples that came from a male mouse, and it's going to pull up every single sample that meets that. You can add way more criteria and further narrow down the types of samples that you're working with. But this makes it very easy for me to find the samples that I need. And then from here, I can either add them to a pick list, which is just a list of samples I need to reference later on, add them to a workflow job, or I can view all of the assay results for these samples that I've selected. So we can kind of narrow down what type of information we're looking at. So if there's any questions, please let me know. This was a very brief overview of Sample Manager. I'm more than happy to kind of schedule next steps, personalize a demo, answer any more questions you may have, and get you started with a guided trial. With Sample Manager, we do guided trials so we can help import a portion of your data. It can be real or it can be fake. And that gives you a better in-depth analysis of how this software may work for you. And so we kind of guide you through your trial. We train you, get your samples in there to look like your real environment and get you going. And this also kind of speeds up the onboarding process too. With Sample Manager, we can help import your historical data, given it's like in an Excel spreadsheet or CSV, or it's in a way that we can communicate with other systems. And then we provide all of our customer support. That's all included in our pricing. But to learn more, you can go to our website and Sample Manager, and we have our pricing listed here below. For our Sample Manager Starter, that's our freezer management, sample registration, source registration, sample lineage. It's $99 per user per month for 5 users. Sample Manager Professional, which includes everything in Starter, plus our ELNs, assay data management, workflow, API access. That's $199 per user per month at 5 users. The pricing can vary depending on how many users you have. We try to make it economical, so the pricing does go down at certain levels the more users you have. So I'll go ahead and answer some questions real fast. If you have any questions, just let me know. If you have them after this, feel free to email me at lancel@labkey.com, or you can go to help@labkey.com too. And then if you do kind of go with us, we can also provide this Exploring Sample Manager. This has a list of our different features in Sample Manager with like video tutorials and documentations too, so you can always read through that. But for now, I'll go ahead and answer any questions that have come up. Thank you so much for joining too. Can you talk about methods for adding or removing large numbers of samples? Yes, definitely. So with Sample Manager, you can import or edit samples by like an Excel spreadsheet. So if you need to update them, you can definitely do that. The sample finder that I just went over is a great way to kind of find those samples that you need to remove. So then you can kind of select them and delete them depending on how many there are you're needing to delete. And then adding them is definitely like a spreadsheet is always great. You can always do a bulk update. So you're basically entering whatever data is going to be the same for all those samples all at once. You only have to do it one time and then you upload it from there. So that is a great question. Yeah, so with bartenders integration, you can print templates from that depending on the bartender license you get, because that is a separate thing, we can kind of work with that and making sure we can kind of set something up that may work with you. We may want to speak more on what criteria you have for setting up the different printers, but you can really customize the different labels you're also using with bartenders. So you can have like this is our blood label that has the collection date and the sample ID, whereas maybe a cell culture, you need to know the strain of bacteria, whatever is that you're kind of pulling out. So you can kind of customize those. Yes, so I will go ahead and email you the different PDF files. If you want that, please just let me know. I can send you some more of those PDF files so you can get some more information there. Are there other upfront costs or just the monthly fee? Yeah, so that is a great question. So that pricing is usually the only pricing we have. If you want to do add-ons like HIPAA compliance, or if you want to do validation, that would be an additional cost. But we don't really charge you anything more for our customer support or updates. Those monthly costs, it is charged on an annual basis, but that would be pretty much all you would be paying. That is a great question, though. Thank you. And if you want some more customized pricing, we can definitely do that. Uh, 5 users for professional is the minimum. You can do less in starter, but the pricing is going to be different if you have fewer than 5 users. What is the difference between locally hosted in the cloud and on-premise configuration? So on the cloud means that you're going to have your own server. It's going to be a private AWS server. That's usually what we use for Sample Manager. So that way you log on with a URL through your email and a password, and then folks that have access to your cloud can log in from there. On-premise usually means that your own IT department is going to be working through your server and they'd be hosting it. They'd be in charge of all of their IT maintenance. For Sample Manager alone, we don't offer that, but with other softwares like our SDMS, that does include Sample Manager. That is an option, but the pricing would be a little bit different there. Can sample volume updates be automated through tasks, workflows, or is volume only updated upon check-in? So volume for Sample Manager is only updated upon check-in for right now. If you can always edit it though through like the sample grid and whatnot, just in case you're adding more derivatives and whatnot. But that I believe may be something that is coming to our LabKey LIMS, which is a more automated version of Sample Manager. When you upload an Excel spreadsheet into LabKey, will the information automatically propagate into the sample data, or does it just upload the file as an attachment? So that is a great question. So we do provide a template within Sample Manager for the type of data you can structure your system in. We also allow import aliases. So if you click this blue button, it'll download kind of how you have your system set up. When you update from a file, you basically click, drag and drop it, and it will automatically associate the correct columns to that specific sample. So it'll upload that sample data for you. If you do want to upload the file as an attachment, that is a possibility. But with what you're saying, it's going to be automatically imported there. Great. Is the system compatible with any barcode reader? Yes. So as long as your computer can read the input from your scanner, we can do that. We do have data fields that you can have customized to have as a barcode. But these are great questions. So thank you so much. If you have any other questions, please feel free to email us. We're always happy to get another demo scheduled. We'll be sending out a recording to this later on. But thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I hope you have a fantastic weekend. Thanks so much.